3. The path of direct experience. Direct experience is the highest of all ways of gaining knowledge. All other means are only fragments. In the path of self-realization, purity, one-pointedness, and control of the mind are essentials. An impure mind hallucinates and creates obstructions, but an orderly mind is an instrument for direct experiences. Direct experience alone is the means. One day my master told me to sit down. He asked, "Are you a learned boy?" I could say anything to him, however outrageous. It was the only place where I could be completely frank. I was never sorry, no matter what I told him. He used to enjoy my foolishness. I replied, "Of course I am learned." He asked, "What have you learned and who taught you? Explain it to me." "Our mother is our first teacher, then our father, and then our brothers and sisters. Later we learn from the children with whom we play, from teachers at school, and from the writers of books. No matter what you have learned, you have not learned a single thing independently of others. So far, all that you have learned is a contribution from others. And from whom have they learned? They have also learned from others. Yet, as a result of all this, you call yourself learned? I pity you, because you have not learned anything independently. You have apparently concluded that there is no such thing as independent learning in the world. Your ideas are the ideas of others." I said, "Wait a minute, let me think." It was a shocking realization that whatever I had learned was nothing of my own. If you put yourself in my place, you may well have the same feeling. The knowledge on which you depend is not at all your knowledge. That is why it is not satisfying, no matter how much of it you possess. Even if you have mastered an entire library, it will never satisfy. "Then how can I be enlightened?" I asked. He said, "By experimenting with this knowledge that you have acquired from outside. Find out for yourself with the help of your direct experience. Finally you will come to a conclusive and fruitful stage of knowledge. All knowing is in vain if it is not direct. Indirect knowledge is of course informative, but not fulfilling. All wise people throughout history have gone through great pains in order to know truth directly. They were not satisfied by the mere opinions of others. They were not frightened off from this quest by the defenders of orthodoxy and dogma, who persecuted and sometimes even executed them because their conclusions were different. Since that time I have tried to follow his advice. I have found that direct experience is the final test of the validity of knowledge. When you have known truth directly, you have the best kind of confirmation. Most of you go to your friends and give your viewpoint. You are seeking confirmation in their opinions. Whatever you think, you want others to confirm it by agreeing with you, to say, "Yes, what you think is right." But somebody else's opinion is no test of truth. When you know truth directly, you do not need to ask your neighbors or your teacher. You don't have to seek confirmation in books. Spiritual truth does not need an external witness. As long as you doubt, it means you have yet to know. Tread the path of direct experience until you attain that state where everything is clear, until all of your doubts are resolved. Direct experience alone has access to the source of real knowledge. Real knowledge removes suffering. Self-reliance is important. It comes when you start receiving experiences directly from within. No doubt you need a teacher. You need a guide. I am not telling you that you should not learn things from other people, or that you need not study books. But I have met people who did not even know the alphabet, and yet whenever we had difficulty in understanding some profound truth or scripture, they alone could give us a solution. Once I was teaching the Brahma Sutras. It is one of the most abstruse books in Vedantic literature. Aphorisms which I myself did not really understand, I explained to my students, and they seemed satisfied, but I was not. In the evening I would go to a Swami who had not actually studied scriptures. He couldn't even sign his name, yet his knowledge was unmatched. He said, "You will never understand these terse aphorisms if you do not have direct experience." Then he told me the story to help me understand the difference between direct and indirect knowledge. A master had a student who had never seen a cow nor tasted milk, but he knew that milk was nutritious. So he wanted to find a cow, milk it, and drink the milk. He went to his master and asked him, "Do you know anything about cows?" The master answered, "Of course." The student requested, "Please describe a cow to me." So the master described a cow. A cow has 4 legs. It is tame, docile, not found in the forest but in villages. Its milk is white, and it is very good for your health. He described the type of tail and ears it has, everything. After this description, the student went in search of a cow. On the way, he came across a statue of a cow. He looked and thought, "This is surely what my master described to me." By chance that day, some people who lived nearby were whitewashing their house, and there was a bucket of whitewash near the statue. The student saw it and concluded, "This must be its milk, which they say is so good for you to drink." He gulped down some of the whitewash, became terribly ill, and had to be taken to a hospital. After he recovered, he went back to his master and angrily charged, "You are no teacher." His master asked, "What's the matter?" The student replied, "Your description of a cow was not at all accurate." "What happened?" He explained, and the master asked, "Did you milk the cow yourself?" "No." "That is why you suffered." The cause of suffering among intellectuals today is not because they don't really know. They know a little, but what they know is not their own knowledge, and that is why they suffer. A little or partial knowledge is always dangerous, like partial truths. A partial truth is not a truth at all. So is the case with partial knowledge. The wise directly perceive truth. The sage who did not even know the alphabet of any language would always remove my doubt. Systematic study under a self-realized and competent teacher helps in purifying the ego. Otherwise, scriptural knowledge makes one egotistical. He who is called an intellectual man today only collects facts from various books and scriptures, Does he really know what he is doing? Feeding intellect with such a knowledge is like eating a food with no food value. One who constantly eats such a food remains sick and also makes others sick. We meet many teachers, and they all teach well, but a student can assimilate only that which is unalloyed and comes directly from self-experienced teachers. A mantra for happiness. Mantra is a syllable, a sound, a word, or a set of words found in a deep state of meditation by the greatest sages. It is not the language in which human beings speak. Those sounds which are received from the superconscious state lead the seeker higher and higher until he reaches the perfect silence. The more awareness is increased, the more mantra reveals new meaning. It makes one aware of a higher dimension of consciousness. Exploiting the noble tradition by selling mantras in the marketplace is absurd. Mantra is exactly like a human being, having many sheaths: gross, subtle, more subtle, and the subtlest. Take for example Aum. These three letters actually represent the three states: waking, dreaming, and sleeping, or the three bodies: gross, subtle, and more subtle. But the fourth state, or the finest body of the mantra, is formless, soundless, and indefinable. A student, if he understands the process of Laya Yoga, meaning dissolution, can know the formless body and superconsciousness of mantra. Mantra is very powerful and essential, a compact form of prayer. If remembered constantly, it becomes a guide. I used to collect mantras like people collect material objects, hoping that some new mantra I was about to receive would be better than what I already had. Sometimes I would compare myself to other students and think, my mantra is better than his mantra. I was very immature. I call it crazy spirituality. There is a Swami who lived quietly deep in the Himalayas between Uttarkashi and Harshil. I went to see him, and when I arrived he asked, "What is the purpose of your coming?" I told him, "I want to recite a mantra." "You will have to wait," he replied. When Westerners go to someone for a mantra, they are prepared to spend a lot of money, but they don't want to wait. I tried the same thing. I said, "Swamiji, I am in a hurry." "Then come next year," he said. "If I stay now, how many days will I have to wait?" I asked. "You will have to wait as long as I want you to wait," he replied. So I waited patiently, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Still the Swami wouldn't give me a mantra. On the fourth day he said, "I want to give you a mantra, but promise that you will remember it all the time." I promised. He said, "Let us go to the Ganges." Countless sages have done spiritual practices on the banks of the sacred Ganges and have been initiated there. I stood by the river and said, "I promise I will not forget this mantra." I repeated this promise several times, but he still delayed. At last he said, "No matter where you live, live cheerfully. This is the mantra. Be cheerful at all times, even if you are behind bars. Anywhere you live, even if you have to go to a hellish place, create heaven there. Remember, my boy, cheerfulness is of your own making. It only requires human effort. You have to create cheerfulness for yourself." Remember this mantra of mine." I was both very happy and very sad, because I had expected him to give me some unusual sound to repeat. But he was more practical. I applied this mantra in my life and find it successful everywhere. His spiritual prescription seems to be the best of physicians, a real key for healing oneself. A mantra for bees. There is a type of mantra called Apta mantra, which belongs uniquely to the particular sage who imparts it. I want to tell you about an experience I had with such a mantra. There was once a Swami who lived in a small hut across the river from Rishikesh. In order to get there, you had to cross the Ganges on a swinging rope bridge. At that time, Rishikesh was not overly populated. Wild elephants sometimes came at night and ate the straw from the walls and roof of our huts. While we were sitting inside, they would come in big herds of 30 or 40, and sometimes would eat half a hut. Tigers also roamed about. It was still quite primitive. Following my master's directions, I went to stay with that Swami across the river. Early in the morning, Swamiji would go for a dip in the Ganges, and I would go with him, for I was expected to follow the customs wherever I stayed. After our baths, we would take the twig of a tree, crush its end, and make it into a brush to clean our teeth. We would do this every day. Swamiji's disciple would climb up a tall tree and pull off a branch to make toothbrushes. One day Swamiji climbed the tree himself. He didn't usually do that, but this time he wanted to show me something. He was over 70 years old, but he climbed the tree easily. There was a hive of wild bees in that tree, but he made no effort to avoid it. On the contrary, he climbed up to that very branch and started talking to the bees. From down below I shouted, "Swamiji, please don't disturb the bees." I covered my head because I thought, if they are disturbed, they will also sting me. They were large and dangerous bees, so dangerous in fact that if 10 or 20 were to sting you, you might not survive. The Swami pulled off a branch right by the hive, but the bees were not aroused. He came down safely and said, "Now you go up and pluck a branch yourself." I replied, "I don't need one. I can live without it." Then I added, "If you want me to climb the tree, first tell me the mantra that protected you." During that time I was fascinated with mantras, and I wanted to know his mantra because I wanted to show people what I could do. That was my purpose. The Swami said that if I climbed the tree, he would tell me the mantra. So I climbed up to the hive. He said, "Go nearer and talk to them face by face. Say, 'I live here alongside you and I don't harm you. Don't harm me.'" I said to Swamiji, "That is not a mantra." He replied, "Do as I say. Talk to the bees. Your lips should be so close that you can whisper to them." I asked, "How do they know Hindi?" He answered, "They know the language of the heart, so they know all the languages. Just talk to them." I was skeptical, but I did exactly as he instructed, and I was surprised that the bees did not attack me. I said, "Swamiji, are they tame?" He laughed and said, "Don't impart this mantra to anyone, for it will work only for you. Don't forget what I'm telling you. Later, when I traveled to more populated areas, I would usually stay outside the city in a garden, and people would come to see me there. I was young and immature and wanted to boast. I would climb the tree and casually take some honey from the hive without incurring a single sting. It was always a surprising feat. When I was in Bhiwani, Punjab, a goldsmith who I knew well requested, "Please give me the mantra." I agreed, forgetting that the Swami told me it would not work for anyone else. I told him how to talk to the bees. He climbed up to the hive and repeated the mantra, but it did not work. The bees attacked him, hundreds of bees at once. He fell from the tree, and we had to rush him to the hospital, where he remained in a coma for 3 days. I was worried, thinking, suppose I have killed this poor man. I prayed continuously that he would be spared. On the 3rd day I was astonished to see the Swami who had given me the mantra appear at the hospital. He said, "What have you done? Through your showing off, you nearly killed someone. Let this be a final lesson to you. This man will recover in the morning, but I am withdrawing the power of this mantra from you. You can never use it again." Since that time I have been more cautious. Sometimes the words of a great man can have the effect of a mantra. Whenever any great man speaks to you, you should accept his words as mantras and practice them. Misuse of Mantra. There are some manuscripts in the monastery to which access is strictly prohibited. No one is allowed to read them except the head of the monastery. They are called Prayoga Shastras. They describe very advanced practices. My master used to say, "You are not to experiment with those manuscripts." But I was obstinate and eager to know what was written in them. I was 18 years old, fearless, but somewhat irresponsible. I thought, I am quite advanced. Why did they write these manuscripts if they were to be left unused? I should do experiments with the practices in these manuscripts. My master is very powerful. He will protect me if anything goes wrong. My master gave me one of these manuscripts to carry for him on a journey. He said, "Do not open it." I was very curious and resolved, if he leaves this manuscript with me and I find myself alone, I'm going to read it. One evening we came upon a small dwelling on a bank of the Ganges. My master went inside the hut to rest. I thought, here is my chance to study the manuscript. There were no windows and only one door in the little dwelling. I locked the door from the outside. I thought I would spend the whole night discovering what was in the manuscript. It was a moonlit night, and I could see clearly. The manuscript was wrapped and tied with a string. I took my time to unwrap it, and then started reading. It described a certain practice and the effects it would produce. After reading for an hour, I thought, why not try it? So I put the manuscript aside. It said that only very advanced yogis should do this practice, and that if it were not done properly, it was very dangerous. At that young age I thought I was very advanced, so I commenced doing it. It involved the repetition of a special mantra in a particular style with certain rituals. That mantra awakens a power outside of a person as well as inside. The book said that the mantra had to be repeated 1001 times. I repeated it 900 times, and nothing seemed to be happening. I concluded there would be no effect. But when I came to 940, I saw a huge woman nearby. She gathered some wood and started making a fire. Then she put water in a big vessel and put it on the fire to boil. By then I had counted to 963. The last I counted was 970, and after that I lost track because I saw a huge man coming from the same direction. At first I thought, this must be the effect of the mantra. I'll not look at him and complete to 1001 repetitions. But he started coming toward me. I had never before seen or even imagined such a gigantic man, and he was completely nude. He asked the woman, "What have you cooked for me?" She said, "I have nothing. If you give me something, I'll cook it." He pointed at me and said, "Look at him sitting over there. Why don't you cut him into pieces and cook him?" When I heard that, my teeth clenched and the mala I was counting with fell from my hand. I fainted. I didn't know how long I remained unconscious. When I regained consciousness, my master was standing in front of me. He slapped me on the cheek and said, "Hey, wake up!" I would become conscious momentarily and exclaim, "Oh, the giant is going to carve me up!" and then lapse into a faint again. This happened 3 or 4 times, until finally my master kicked me, became more insistent, and said, "Get up! Why have you done this? I told you not to practice these mantras, and you locked me in, you foolish boy." From this experience, I came to realize the power of mantra. I started practicing the mantra which my master had given me, and I began to count on it for even little things. I did many foolish and silly things when I was young, but my mantra, which created awareness for me, always helped me to come out of those situations. If mantra is not properly used with spiritual discipline, it can lead to hallucinations, as it did for me. Hallucinations are the products of an impure and untrained mind. Mantra becomes helpful because the mind is purified and directed inward. Without knowing the meaning of the mantra, the proper feeling cannot be aroused, and without strong feeling, mantra and its technical repetition is not of much use. I receive a beating. Once I was maintaining silence in order to watch my inner feelings and observe my behavior. I was living on a bank of the Saryu River outside of Ayodhya, the birthplace of Rama. People there knew that I was practicing silence and could not ask for food, so they brought me a meal once a day. It was summer and I did not have any shelter. Suddenly one evening, thundering clouds appeared, and it started raining heavily. I had only one long blanket with which to cover myself, so I started going towards one of the temples to get out of the rain. It was already dark. When I entered through the back side of the temple and sat under the portico, 3 temple guards came with bamboo sticks and asked me what I was doing there. They thought I was a thief. Since I was keeping silence, I did not respond to them. Then they started hitting me very hard with their sticks. I was knocked unconscious by their blows. The temple priest came with a lantern to see who the intruder was. My head was bleeding, and there were many bruises all over my body. The priest, who knew me well, was shocked to see my horrible condition. When I became conscious again, he and the servants of the temple began apologizing for their serious mistake. That day I realized that practicing austerity is not easy. I continued in my path of self-training. but I stopped roaming in the cities. Among all the methods for training and therapies, the highest of all is that of self-training, in which one remains conscious of one's mind, actions, and speech. I used to build up my sankalpa, meaning right determination, and always kept track of my feelings, thoughts, speech, and actions. During those days I found that whenever I would calm down my conscious mind in meditation, the bubbles of thoughts would suddenly come up from the unconscious mind. In learning to control the mind and its modifications, it is essential to go through the process of self-observation, analysis, and meditation. Learning to control the mind and careful study of the relationship between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind took me a long time. Many times I thought, now I have conquered my thoughts. My mind is under my control. But after a few days, some unknown bubble would arise from the bottom of the unconscious and would control my conscious mind, thus changing my attitudes and behavior. At times I was disappointed and depressed, but I always met someone who helped and guided me. As an aspirant, it is always wise to be vigilant and firm in practicing meditation without expecting much in the beginning. I was told that there is no instant method of meditation. Modern students expect immediate results from meditation, and this expectation causes them to fantasize, imagine, and hallucinate many things which they think are spiritual experiences, but are actually products of their unconscious minds. As a result, the frustration imbalances them, and either they stop meditating or they start following strange methods harmful to their progress. Unique practice of Tantra. My brother disciple, whose father was a learned Sanskrit Pandit, was from Mendipur, Bengal. When he was 18 years old, before I had met him, his family forced him to get married. The marriage ceremony was being performed in the evening, and this suited his plans well. During a Hindu wedding, the bride and groom participate in a fire ceremony and take 7 steps around the fire. On the 4th step, he jumped out of the ritual and ran into the fields. The people in the wedding party did not understand his behavior. They began to chase him, but could not catch him. He walked for several days, until he reached the banks of the Ganges and started following the river in search of a spiritual teacher. For 6 years he went through many experiences, but did not find a teacher. Then he met my master at Srinagar in the Himalayas. When they met, my master embraced him and knew that they had known each other before. My brother disciple lived with my master for 3 months, and then was instructed to go to Gangotri, where we stayed in a cave together. One day he began talking about his hometown, Medanipur, and told me that if I ever visited there, I should tell his family that he had become a renunciate and lives in the Himalayas. Soon after that, I visited his home and met the woman to whom he was to have been married. She was waiting for him to come home. I suggested to her that she get married to someone else, because the marriage ceremony had not been completed. On hearing such advice from me, she said, "You and your brother disciple are worshippers of the devil and not of God." She was in a fit of anger. I went back to my hut, which was situated outside the village. In that area, Tantra was practiced. Practically all the homes of this area worshipped Mother Divine, calling her Ma Kali. I had heard much about Tantra and had read a few scriptures. I wanted to meet someone who could really demonstrate the practices so that I would have no doubts of their validity. One of my brother's disciples' cousins in that village introduced me to a Mohammedan tantric who was 92 years of age. I went to see him and we talked for 3 hours. He was famous there as a Maulavi, a priest who leads the prayers in the mosques and knows the Quran, the sacred Bible of Islam. The next morning the Maulavi took me to a pond outside the village. He also brought a chicken. First he tied this chicken with a string, and then he tied the other end of a string to a banana plant. He told me to sit down and watch attentively. He was muttering something and throwing black-eyed peas on the string. The chicken fluttered and became lifeless. He said, "The chicken is dead." I thought, this is not being creative. It is a very bad power. It's black magic. He asked me to make sure that the chicken was dead. I said, "Can I put the chicken under water for some time?" He said, "Go ahead." I kept the chicken under water for more than 5 minutes and then took it out. To my knowledge, the chicken was dead. Then he brought the chicken back to life by performing the same ritual of throwing black-eyed peas and muttering something. This really shook me up. He said, "Now tie one end of the string on the banana plant and tie the other end to your waist. I'll show you something different." Instead of doing what he said, I ran as fast as I could toward the village, leaving the old Mullavi and his chicken far behind me. When I arrived, I was breathless, and the villagers did not know why I was running so fast. I told them that the old Mullavi wanted to kill me, but no one believed me, for in that area he was considered to be a very holy man. I thought, I'd better leave this place and tread my path instead of seeking such miracles. From this place I went to Calcutta to stay a few days with the Chief Justice R. P. Mukherjee. When I told him of my experience and asked if I had imagined it or hallucinated, he said, "No, such things happen." Later I asked some sages how such a miracle was accomplished. They could not explain it, but acknowledged that Bengal was famous for such practices. When I related my story to my master, he laughed at me and said, "You need exposure to all sorts of things, although you should not attempt to practice yourself. You should follow only that discipline which has been given to you. This sort of Tantra is not the real science of Tantra, but is an offshoot of Tantrism. The power of the mind can be used in many ways. Without knowledge of the goal of life, mental faculties can be directed negatively for harming others. But ultimately this misuse of mental powers destroys the person who practices it. There still exist a few people with such tantric powers, but out of 100, one is genuine, and the other 99 are magicians. You have committed many thefts. In my youth I was searching for miracles. Once when I saw a person lying on a bed of nails, I said to him, "I wish I could do that. Can you teach me?" He said, "Of course, but first you will have to beg alms for me and bring money to me. If you promise that you will give me whatever money you have, I will teach you." One after another I met many such people, and they despised each other, saying, "He is nothing. I will teach you something better." One of them had a big steel needle, and he pushed it through his arm. he said. "See, there is no bleeding. I will teach you this, and you will be able to make money by demonstrating it to others. But you will have to become my disciple and give me part of what you earn." I left him and went to another person. Many people respected this man, but I wanted to know why so many people followed him around. I wondered, what exclusive knowledge does he have? Is he wise? Is he a great yogi? I stayed with him until everyone went away. When I was all alone with him, he asked, "Which is the most luxurious hotel that you know of?" I said, "The Savoy Hotel in London." He said, "You pay me 100 rupees, and I will get you some delicious food from the restaurant of that hotel." I gave him 100 rupees, and suddenly some food appeared before me, exactly as it was prepared at that hotel. Next I asked for some food from Hamburg, Germany. Again I paid him 70 rupees, and he got the dish I requested. It appeared along with the bill. I thought, why should I go back to my master? I'll stay with this man and all my needs will be taken care of. Then, without any botheration, I can quietly meditate and study. He asked, "What type of watch do you want?" I replied, "I already have a good watch." But he said, "I will give you a better watch." And he did it. When I looked at the watch, I thought, this watch is manufactured in Switzerland. He is not creating these things. He is only doing a trick, transporting them from one place to another. 2 weeks later, I went to him again and bowed before him. I gave him an oil massage and helped him cook food. He was pleased with this, and he instructed me so I could do things similar to those he had done. I practiced until one of the Swamis from our monastery came and slapped me, saying, "What are you doing?" He took me to my master, who said, "You have committed many thefts." I asked, "What thefts?" He answered, "You ask for sweets, and they come to you from someone's shop. They disappear from the shop, and the owner does not know what has happened to them." I promised my master that I would never do it again. Later I met a man who worked as a salesman in a store that sold sewing machines in Delhi. I told him about the Haji and his powers. The salesman said, "If he can get a Singer sewing machine from my store in Delhi, I will consider him to be the greatest man alive and follow him for the rest of my life." So we both went to him and requested him to perform the miracle. He said, "I will get it immediately," and it appeared. Then the salesman became concerned that it would be missing from the store, and he might be accused of stealing it. The Haji tried to send it back, but he could not do so. He started weeping and crying, "I've lost my powers." When the salesman returned to Delhi, he took the machine with him. In the meantime at the store, they had discovered the machine was missing, and they reported the matter to the police. The police found it in the salesman's possession, and he was taken to the court. No one believed his story, and the salesman was punished. I had many such experiences, and I insulted my master many times by saying, "There are people who have powers greater than yours, so I like to follow them." He said, "Go ahead. I want you to grow and be great. You don't have to follow me." Later I realized that mostly such phenomena are tricks. Wherever they are found to be genuine, they are black magic. Spirituality has nothing to do with these miracles. The third chapter of the Yoga Sutras explains many methods of attaining siddhi, or powers, but these siddhis create stumbling blocks in the path of enlightenment. One person in millions does indeed have siddhis, but I have found that such people are often greedy, egotistical, and ignorant. The path of enlightenment is different from the intentional cultivation of powers. The miracles performed by Buddha, Christ, and other great sages were spontaneous and for a purpose. They were not performed with selfish motives or to create a sensation. On the path of yoga, sometimes one comes across the potentials of siddhis. A yogi without having any desire for siddhi might get one, but one who is aware of the purpose of his life never misuses them. Misuse of siddhi is the downfall of a yogi. To commit a theft is accepted to be a crime socially and morally. Jugglery is not any part of yoga. Siddhis do exist, but only with adepts. A Flamethrower Swami. I once met a Swami who could produce fire from his mouth. The flame would shoot out several feet. I tested him to see if the phenomenon was authentic. I asked him to wash out his mouth, to be sure he was not secreting something like phosphorus in it. I also had my friends examine him. He seemed genuine, so I concluded, this man must definitely be more advanced than my master. That Swami said to me, "You are wasting your time and energy staying with your master. Follow me, and I will give you some real wisdom. I will show you how to produce fire." I was so swayed by him that I decided to leave my master. I went to my master and said, "I have found someone more advanced than you, and I have decided to become his disciple." He said, "I am delighted. Go ahead. I want you to be happy. What does he do?" I replied, "He produces fire from his mouth. He's a very powerful Swami." My master requested, "Please take me to him." The next morning we went. The Swami was staying 23 miles away in the mountains, and it took us 2 days to get there. When we arrived, the Swami bowed before my master. I was surprised and asked my master, "Do you know him?" He replied, "Of course. He left our monastery some time ago, and now I know where he has been hiding." My master asked him, "What have you been doing here?" He said, "Sir, I have learned to produce fire from my mouth." When my master saw the flame coming from his mouth, he laughed gently. He instructed me, "Ask him how many years it has taken to learn this." The Swami was proud of his accomplishment. He bragged, "I have practiced 20 years to master this." Then my master said to me, "A match will produce fire in a second. If you wish to spend 20 years to produce fire from your mouth, you are a fool. My child, that is not wisdom. If you really want to meet masters, I'll give you directions to where they are staying. Go and have the experiences." Later I realized that all such siddhis are but mere signs on the path. These powers have nothing to do with spirituality. I later found out, after experiencing and examining, that these psychic powers have little value. To the contrary, they can create serious obstacles on the path. Sometimes psychic powers develop. You start telling the fortunes of others. You start knowing things. These are all distractions. Do not allow them to obstruct your path. Too many people, including swamis, have wasted time and energy on such distractions. Anyone who wants to develop siddhis can do so and can demonstrate certain supernatural feats. But enlightenment is an entirely different matter. An astounding mystic. Selflessness is one of the prominent signs of a spiritual man. If this quality is missing in the character of one who is supposed to be spiritual, he is not really a spiritual person. There was a well-known master, Neem Karoli Baba, who befriended me when I was still quite young. He lived in Nainital, one of the hill resorts in the Himalayas. He was a man who lived half here, half there. When someone came to him, he would say, "Okay, now I have seen you, you have seen me. Ja, 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 ja," which means, "Go, go, go, go." That was his habit. Once we were sitting and talking, when one of the richest men in India came to see him with quite a big bundle of Indian currency. The man said, "Sir, I have brought this for you." Baba spread the notes out and sat on them. He said, "They are not very comfortable as a cushion, and I don't have a fireplace, so I cannot burn them for heat. They are of no use to me. What shall I do with them?" The man said, "Sir, it's money." Baba returned the money and asked him to get some fruit with it. The rich man said, "Sir, there is no market here." "Then how can you say it is money?" asked Baba. "If it doesn't buy fruit, it isn't money for me." Then Baba asked him, "What do you want from me?" The man said, "I have a headache." Baba replied, "That you have created for yourself. What can I do for you?" He protested, "Sir, I have come for your help." Baba relented. "All right, henceforth there will be no headache, but from now on you'll be a headache to other people. You will be so miserably rich that you will be a headache to the whole of your community." And he is indeed a headache to his whole community even today. It is true that some amount of money is one of the necessary means of making oneself comfortable in the world. But it is also true that having more than necessary can be a source of misery. Hoarding money is a sin, for we are depriving others and creating disparity in society. Neem Karoli Baba loved Lord Rama, an incarnation of God, and was always muttering a mantra which no one understood. This sage was adored by many people in northern India. People did not give him rest. They traveled with him from one mountain and village to another. He was very mysterious in his ways. I had many more delightful and funny experiences with Neem Karoli Baba, which you wouldn't believe, but a few Americans who have met him will understand what I am talking about. If someone came to see him, he would say, "You were talking against me with such and such a person under such and such a tree." He would give the exact date and time of day. Then he would say, "Now you have seen me. Go, go, go." Then he would cover himself with a blanket. One day a pharmacist was delivering some powder from Talital to Malital. He was a devotee of Neem Karoli Baba, so he stopped to see him on the way. I was also there. Baba said, "I'm hungry. What is it that you're carrying?" The pharmacist said, "This is arsenic. Wait, and I will bring some food for you." But Baba snatched the powder from him and ate a handful. Then he asked for a glass of water. The pharmacist thought he would die from the poison, but the next day he was quite normal. He was not aware of the external. If you asked him, "Have you eaten your food?" he would answer, "No," or "Yes," but it would have no meaning. If your mind is somewhere else, you can eat many times a day and still remain famished. I saw this with him. 5 minutes after eating, he would say, "I am hungry," because he did not know that he had already eaten. I would say, "You have taken your food," and he would answer, "All right, then I am not hungry." If I wouldn't tell him, "You have now eaten," he would not stop. One day I thought, let me see how many times he can eat. That day he took 40 meals at various houses. He was eating the whole day. We wanted to know about his powers, and he knew what we wanted. So when anyone brought food before him, he ate. They would ask, "Will you eat?" And he would say, "Okay." He went on eating all day. Finally I came and said, "You have eaten enough." He said, "Oh, have I?" I said, "Yes." In such a high state, one becomes like a child. He is not fully aware of mundane things, but he is constantly aware of the truth. My mother teacher. I once went to Assam to meet Mataji, a great lady yogi who was then 96 years of age. She was living next to a famous Shakti temple called Kamakhya. Everyone aspires to go there, but very few are able to visit that place because it is in a far corner of India. From Calcutta I went to Guwahati and then on foot to Kamakhya. I reached the temple late in the evening, stumbling in the darkness and stubbing my toes many times. At that time there were 3 or 4 small wooden houses near the temple. I was asked by the temple priest to stay on the second floor of the same building in which the famous woman was living. My room had many holes and cracks through which mice and snakes would crawl in. It was terrible, but I was helpless. I would close the holes with pieces of cloth, which I found here and there. I managed to live in that room for 2 months. My experiences there were shocking and surprising in the beginning, but very pleasant toward the end of my stay. It was the 20th year in which this old woman had not come outside during the daytime. However, she regularly visited the temple at midnight and at 3 o'clock in the morning. For the first 4 nights I remained inside my room, but on the 5th night I came out and went to the temple. It was a moonlit night. When I reached the temple gate, I could hear someone chanting mantras inside. It was that old woman sitting all alone with an oil lamp burning beside her. When she sensed me outside the north gate, she shouted very assertively, "Don't come in. You will kill yourself. I am the Mother Divine. Get out of this place." I was frightened, but at the same time I was curious to know what was happening inside that small temple. I peeped in and she rushed toward me. She was completely naked, a bag of bones wrapped inside shining skin. Her eyes were glowing like bowls of fire. She shouted, "Go away! Why are you watching what I'm doing?" I bowed in reverence and out of fear, thinking that she would calm down. But she whipped me with her cane and drove me away. I went back to my room. The next morning, this mother teacher called me to her room and began to talk to me. I said, "I need your blessings." She was in silence for a few seconds and then muttered my nickname, which was not known to anyone except my Guru Deva. She hugged me and put me on her lap. I don't know what happened to me, but then, if there was a seventh heaven, I can tell you I was there. Stroking me on the head, she blessed me and said, "Although you will find many obstacles on the path, all will be crossed. Go with my blessings." But I said, "I want to stay here for some time," and she consented. When I asked this mother teacher what she was doing all alone in the temple at 3 o'clock in the morning, she said, "I do Shakti worship, and I do not want anyone near me at midnight and at 3 in the morning. From midnight to 2 o'clock and from 3 to 4:30, nobody visits that temple." She permitted me to sit with her for half an hour every evening. When I sat in front of her, my whole consciousness would rise, exactly as if I was sitting before my master. In my heart I accepted her as my mother teacher. I had many questions I wanted to ask her, but she told me to remain silent. I followed her instruction and received answers to my question without either of us speaking. The silence was more communicative than any other type of teaching. The most advanced teachers impart their knowledge in silence. She was a very powerful and yet gentle old woman with tremendous willpower. I observed that whatever she said would always come true. When someone came to ask her for help, she spoke very little and always in a brief sentence. "It will happen. Go. Bless you. Pray to Mother Divine." Then she would go to her room. When I heard that this mother, whom I called Mother Teacher, did not lie down to sleep, but would remain in her meditation posture throughout the night, I started observing her by peeping through the crack in her door. I spent 3 days and nights watching her, and found that it was true that she never slept. One day I said to her, "Mother, if you lie down, I will give you a gentle massage, which will help you to fall asleep." She giggled and said, "Sleep? That is not for me. I am beyond sloth and inertia. I enjoy sleepless sleep, for which I do not need to lie down. One who enjoys yoga sleep, why does she need the sleep of pigs?" I asked, "What is that?" She said, "Pigs eat beyond their capacity and then lay themselves down snoring. I wonder how they can sleep so much." She explained to me the whole anatomy of sleep and asked me if I knew that mechanism in which a human being goes from the conscious state to the dreaming state, and then to the deeper state of sleep. She started giving me accurate and systemic lessons. After that I was able to understand the Mandukya Upanishad, which explains the 3 states of mind: waking, dreaming, sleeping, and the 4th state, Turiya, which is termed as the state beyond. The Mandukya is considered to be the most important and difficult of all the Upanishads. I filled up 70 pages of my diary, taking down the notes as she talked. In her gentle, slow speech, there were no repetitions and no mistakes. She gave a systematic commentary on this Upanishad, which I intellectually understood, but did not understand in reality. until I started to practice remaining conscious during these 4 states. After 2.5 months, the day of parting came. I was very sad, but she said, "Don't be attached to the mother image in my physical body and personality. I am the mother of the universe, who is everywhere. Learn to raise your consciousness above and beyond my mortal self." With tears in my eyes, I looked at her and she said, "Be fearless. I am with you." I bade goodbye to her, and she came back to my Himalayan abode again. My master spoke very highly of this old woman. She had lived by that temple area since she was 12 years old, and stayed there up till the age of 101, when she left her mortal body. An Ageless Yogi. Practically every summer, Devraha Baba, who lives in East Uttar Pradesh, comes to a shrine in the Himalayan mountains for a few months. He is said to be quite aged. I do not know this directly, but I have heard Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the first President of India, say that from his own experience he can attest to the fact that Devraha Baba is more than 150 years of age. He said that in his childhood his father took him to this Baba, who was then a very old man. At the time he gave the statement, Dr. Prasad was more than 70 years of age. The statement roused my curiosity, and I made it a point to meet this Baba when he stopped in Rishikesh on his way to the mountain shrine. We conversed often there. He was living in a temporary pine wood hut, which was constructed for him wherever he went. Sometimes he also lived in tree houses. He looked quite healthy, and appeared to be in his 70s. Although he was very austere and gentle, and doesn't allow any student to touch him, he sometimes gives discourses on divine love. He is very famous in North India. Huge crowds assemble to have his darshan, meaning glance. He has a very large following, and the police and other government officers often visit him with the desire to be blessed. Several of my American students visited him during Kumbh Mela, which is a great fair which is held every 12 years in India at Hardwar in 1974. I tried to find out the secret of how he lived to be so aged. I discovered that he practices certain aspects of yoga regularly, and he eats only fruits and vegetables. There are many specific practices in yoga. Individual aspirants choose those which suit them. During my conversation with Baba, he said, "Happiness is the greatest wealth of all. Punctuality is essential. Practicing advanced methods of breathing is equally important. This technique of agelessness is a technique of pranayama. This Devraha Baba is a symbol of love."